On that note, these are the mics to speak in. These ones are for the recording, so you can just leave them with the yellow tape. Make sense? So, on that note, it's nice to see everybody and to have a start at this sort of fiscal year, as it were, and a chance to look ahead to this next several months in terms of the board meetings. I just see today as a good chance to hear from the commissioner and his team on both the arc of our work, but also to start this budget discussion earlier than usual, which is to say we're often a little late and running up against the calendar in terms of November and December. So today provides an opportunity to have a preliminary discussion about the FY19 budget and get into some of the details and directionality from the board's perspective. So I'm going to turn it over to the commissioner.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman, members of the board, members of the public.
Oh, sorry, did I just assume that you didn't have any comments?
I am happy to yield my time to the Secretary.
I had nothing to say, but now that I've been snubbed,
I hope that you
I have a long speech to. No, I will gladly pass to the Commissioner. Thank you.
Apologies.
I'm just
Secretary.
happy that moment was recorded for posterity. And as we can already see the advantages to having a recording on display.
Now that we're recording, I will not speak.
Thank you. Looking forward to another board season and carrying forward with an ambitious agenda this year. I believe that the chairwoman noted this, but in addition to recording the meetings, starting next month, they will be live streamed. So for those members of the public here and for those who you're associated with, please take note that you'll have the opportunity to watch these meetings live starting in October. And we think that that will be of benefit to all of us, having our work be more transparent and available. And hopefully that will assist with the engagement with the public around this work. I have only one thing.
Excuse me, Tom, can
Yes.
that also go out in the commissioner's email so that folks know about it? Because I've heard from a few people that they would appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
We will do that. Thank you. I have only one thing that I wanted to mention as part of my comments today, because I'll be participating in both of the presentations hereafter. And that is simply to introduce personally, after having done it to you by email, our new Associate Commissioner for Workforce Development, Dr. Ola Friday. As I noted to you, Ola is joining us most recently from the Pennsylvania Office of Child Development and Early Learning, where she worked to develop the Early Childhood Career Ladder, a statewide system for Pennsylvania. She's been involved in a number of programs and policies around professional development and training activities in conjunction with that work. Prior to that, she had worked for the state of New York in developing their quality rating and improvement system. And as you might imagine, just by virtue of those activities, and she's been involved in quite a bit more, Ola was a outstanding candidate for the position that we had created a year ago, and are very happy to have resolved it with her hiring. So I wanted to just take this occasion to recognize Ola's arrival here at EEC. Ola is standing here. I'm sorry I've been remiss in acknowledging that she's here. We are thrilled to have her. Ola will be working for, technically, but I'm sure with our Deputy Commissioner Anita Moeller in carrying on work that we initiated over the course of the last several years in advancing that work. So I don't know if Ola wants to say a quick word or two, but you are welcome to do so.
Quick hello. I'm really excited to be here and working with the board, everyone at EEC.
That's great.
Welcome.
Thank you. And that concludes my comments, because I'll be saying more a bit later here. So happy to take any questions now, but I imagine that we'll be getting into those a little further on. Terrific. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'll move to statements from the public, starting with Eva Bermudez from SEIU Local 509 about the transportation study. Or is that, was this, yep.
Hi. Where would you like me to sit?
Just right here at this table would be great.
Hi, I'm actually not Eva. She's stuck in traffic.
Okay.
My name is Ninfa Breton. I am one of the reps for SEIU Local 509, and this is Selena Reyes. She is a family child care provider and our chapter president from Lawrence. And actually, we don't know if you are going to touch on the transportation study today, and that's why we are here. Because we received a copy of it from the advisory council, and it talked about that there was no need to have the vouchers include transportation, so it concerned us greatly. So that's why we are here, and Selena can speak a little bit more about that as a family child care provider that receives children with vouchers and the families that are in need of transportation. Not everybody lives in the area where there is public transportation readily available the way there is sort of in Boston, in the Boston area itself. So is that part of the agenda for today, or should we leave this for another day?
It's actually not on the agenda today. It may be on the agenda at the Fiscal and Oversight Subcommittee later this month on the 25th of September. And then this board is likely to take it up sometime before the end of the calendar year, but it's not on today's agenda. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Okay.
No.
So we can then proceed, and we will touch it when it is on the agenda, if that's appropriate. Okay?
That sounds just fine.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sanandia Bala from the United Way.
Good afternoon. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Sanandia Bala, and I am the Senior Director of Educational Success at United Way right downstairs. Earlier this year, I came to you to provide some testimony on United Way's efforts to bring a framework called Shared Services in Early Education to Massachusetts to support early education and care, and ultimately after-school programs as well, starting with United Way's footprint communities and ultimately expanding throughout the Commonwealth. As a brief overview for those who were not here, Shared Services is a framework created by the Alliance for Early Childhood Finance and is in operation in many communities and states throughout the country to support sustainable, high-quality, center and home-based programs in light of challenges due to rising costs, shrinking budgets, rapidly changing workforce, diversified needs of children and families, and the increasing demand to improve quality. I'm really pleased to share with you that after a year of planning, bringing together programs, identifying resources, and learning from other communities and states, we're finally launching this effort in the next few months. Most significantly, United Way has taken the lead in sponsoring the Early Childhood Education Shared Resources, a national web platform that forms an extensive knowledge hub of tools focused on supporting the needs of early education and care staff. This tool includes quick links to difficult-to-find state and federal regulations, samples and templates of procedures, policies, forms, toolkits, and handbooks, and helps providers manage their programs more effectively and efficiently. The resources are created with the knowledge and expertise of early childhood and education and care experts from over 26 states, resulting in very high-quality vetted tools. The web platform is developed, hosted, and maintained by CCA for Social Good, the CSR division of a company out of Manchester, New Hampshire. Massachusetts will be the 27th state to make this customized resource available to early education and care providers. Nationally, programs leveraging this resource save on average $9,000 annually. Over the next month, United Way will share this first with staff at EEC who have been kept apprised of this effort, as well as a small cohort of providers for their feedback. Then, we hope to launch it more formally with a pilot group of providers, provide coaching and support, and track and measure its utility and effectiveness, including cost savings. Additionally, United Way is launching a pilot on the ground Shared Services Alliance with a cohort of programs in Cambridge and Somerville with the collaboration and support of each of the city's early childhood directors. This alliance will include usage of the web platform, a relationship with a property management company, provide a discounted facilities management and other services to this group, as well as monthly communities of practice meetings to identify further opportunities for sharing and collaboration. United Way is also forming a collaboration with the City of Boston's Office for Women's Advancement, the Policy Office, and the Office of Economic Development to leverage shared services in an effort to support and strengthen family child care providers throughout the year. I'm all done. I just wanted to say I look forward to keeping you apprised of this effort, working closely with EEC staff, and also wanted you to look out for a formal invitation to the Shared Services website launch in October. So thank you, and I did bring with me a mock-up of the homepage of the Shared Services website, which will be live for soft launch, as well as more details about the Cambridge-Somerville pilot that we're launching. So I will pass those around.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Joni.
Can I ask a question, please?
Absolutely.
So, I need to find out more about this, obviously.
Yes.
I mean, I mean, the overview.
Yes.
Last time. If this is going to support providers, does it and how intersect or support other ongoing efforts that we have, like differential licensing, QRIS, the EPS? How?
So as you can see, I know it's small, on a mock-up of the homepage, there are several tabs across the top, which we have actually helped to customize and build out. So there's a Raise Quality tab, for example, and that actually has a Raise Quality toolkit where we've taken, and this is going to be on us at United Way to maintain, and we've hired a project coordinator for this effort, who's a who just retired as a program director in Somerville, to put anything and everything related to QRIS that providers need to know on the web platform. It actually doesn't recreate what's already on EEC's website. It just directs providers back to EEC's website, but through the appropriate links and sections. Same with the regulations section for the state regulations. We've actually broken it out because there's so many things under regulations to pay attention to, and for family child care providers as well as center-based. So again, we've broken it out and provided individual links to the relevant sections of EEC's website. The hope is not to recreate EEC's website, but to make it easier to send people to the website to find what they're looking for.
Thank you.
Great.
Nick, point. Actually, I'll make 2 points. One is thank you for not trying to recreate EEC's website. And I think everybody in the room might agree with that sentiment. The point I was going to make, however, was one of gratitude. Thank you for the United Way for undertaking the leadership in this work and building off of the model that's in New Hampshire. I had the opportunity, along with some colleagues, to see this work profiled not only based on the meetings that you would reference here in Massachusetts, but it was profiled at the State Administrators Conference for all federal grant recipients last month in Washington, D.C. I was wondering if you might just take a minute to explain to folks the progression in New Hampshire, because I think as you look at this, it's obviously appealing just at a superficial level, the idea of aggregating some resources and allowing those to be leveraged for cost savings at a program level. But I think what's been interesting is how the seed money has led to cost savings, and there's a path forward for programs to then buy into this because of those cost savings. So there's an opportunity to scale that sometimes isn't obvious in some of these pilot efforts.
Absolutely. So the reason that part of the reason we've decided to undertake this in Massachusetts is because we did the same in New Hampshire back in 2011. United Way pulled together 10 early childhood programs, 6 of which were in financial distress, to identify a solution to help to better support their sustainability and their business model. And so the way it's grown in New Hampshire, just long story short, is we launched it with 10 programs. The way that we created it is similar to what you're seeing in Cambridge and Somerville. The web platform is being one component. The contract with a facilities management company that can also provide discounted liability insurance, and on liability insurance alone, programs saved 20 to 25% annually. And then the third piece being the community of practice with shared quality goals and a focus on identifying other ways to collaborate and support each other. United Way invested about $100,000 at that time to pay for all 3 of those components. During the first year, we spent a lot of time tracking the time and cost savings and the benefit to programs. We found that programs saved, at minimum, $5,000 to $10,000 annually and continue to do so. One program saved $26,000 on food alone by switching their food supply vendor. So after that first year and doing this analysis, we created a membership-based model. So there is a membership fee of $1,200 in New Hampshire. We don't know what we're going to do in Massachusetts. We know that there will be some sort of membership fee, but potentially a tiered membership. And so after for every program we brought on, for their first year, they got free membership to the Alliance, with the only expectation being that they use as much as they could and do their best to utilize every piece of this with coaching and support. And then after that, they started paying the $1,200. So by 2015, our investment had come down significantly, and we had 35 member programs. In 2015, due to conversations at the state level, the Child Care Licensing Bureau in New Hampshire actually had some money to spend, and they decided they were trying to configure their QRIS. They're very simple. It's like license plus. That's what they have. But they decided that what they would do is help to expand this program and get programs up in their quality by covering the first year membership fee or providing first year membership to any programs who were committed to getting to License Plus. And so they brought in the coaching for the License Plus piece, and then United Way and Early Learning New Hampshire, who's the fiscal agent for this effort, and provides a lot of the EPS type of work in New Hampshire. We provided the technical assistance and administration of the shared services model. So to date, in those past 3 years, we've expanded to about 180 programs in 9 regions of New Hampshire. So now there are local regional alliances and one statewide director. And each regional alliance has a part-time coordinator. And that all comes from the membership fees. So this year, United Way's investment is $40,000. And we anticipate that by 2020, this effort should be largely self-sustaining with some grant support and administrative support from various entities.
Great. Any last questions?
The one last thing I'll add is that we've actually tracked and seen an impact on teacher qualifications and retention for those who are in this group. So we're excited to track that here as well.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Wayne Izagiri from Nurtury.
Good afternoon. Bigger one. Move over. I'm glad I'm not being streamed. Yet. Good afternoon, board members, Commissioner Weber. My name is Wayne Izagiri. I'm the President and CEO of Nurtury, and I wrote down my comments so that I don't stray, as I often do. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to come and provide you comments at the start of your board meeting. I have 3 goals in mind. 1, actually to say thank you. 2, to tell you what we plan to do with the rate increases at Nurtury. And the 3rd, to share some specific actions for as you go forward. And I hate to include the 3rd. I'd like to just stay with the thank you and what we did with the money, but I don't get to come before you that often. So first, a sincere thank you. 2 or 3 years ago, I came here and shared some of the significant reductions in capacity that we at Nurtury had made and told you that the sector was in crisis. Since then, you've submitted budget requests to our governor greater than the administration had asked for. You've advocated strongly for robust rate increases and recommended the shifting of unspent dollars to increase rates of reimbursement. I am very grateful for all this work. I am sure there were lots of actions and activities by all of you to which I have no knowledge that led to the significant and important decision of the governor to increase the infant toddler rate to the 50th percentile of market and to raise all rates by 6%. I am also sure that your position and your leadership helped to support the legislature in their decision to create a $15 million rate reserve and to use the unspent funds for rate increases and other actions. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. As a result of your action, Nurtry has taken and will be taking the following actions. Family child care educators at Nurtry have received an increase in their rates of 3.6%, and for many of them, there's an additional increase that ranges anywhere from $5 per infant or toddler to $23.21 per infant per toddler per day. That is significant. As soon as you provide official notice and release the center rate increase, we are moving our starting salaries from $11 an hour to $14 an hour. Every teacher whose salary is currently greater than $14 an hour is receiving an additional 6% salary increase on top of an already approved or previously approved 3% salary increase, which means that all Nurtry staff will be receiving a 9% salary increase. We are also hiring a talent manager whose focus will be on the sourcing, recruitment, retention, development, and advancement of talent in our organization, with a particular emphasis on teachers and program directors. We are expanding the number of family partners, which is family partner staff in the agency by 7 to a total of 11, which will give us the opportunity to expand our engagement and development of families, the 1,200 families that enroll their children at Nurtry. In addition, your action has given us the confidence to launch a partnership with Boston University, in which both institutions is sharing a tenured professor who is functioning as Nurtry's program and evaluation officer, and who brings with her a complement of PhD students focused on program development, assessment, and evaluation. This past fiscal year, which ended in August 31st for us, ended with a significant with the third significant consecutive budget deficit. I expect Nurtry to end this fiscal year in a surplus. Why? Because this increase, coupled with some reorganization, not only allowed us to increase salaries, but afforded us the room and the space to add other talent that was needed, and to use that capacity to innovate, to continue restructuring, and be more forward-looking. Again, I thank you. My teachers, thank you, but they're in their classrooms right now. This is a big deal, by the way. 9% increase to salaries. You really ought to feel, you should feel really good about that. Third, I ask you to continue some specific steps. First, as important as this increase has been, we know that it follows many, many lean years. With this in mind, I ask you to release the remaining $8 million of rate reserve approved by the legislature and signed by the governor as soon as possible. The current approved increases are important, but the workforce crisis still continues. And I'll leave my comments in writing, so I won't go into a lot more detail I have as to why. Finally, I did want to say I took a look today. I wrote this yesterday, but I took a look yesterday at your 5-year plan that the board created a few years ago, where you identified 4 areas for strategic direction: kindergarten readiness, high-quality early education programs, professionally prepared, adequately compensated, and diverse workforce, and an EEC and its board providing leadership direction and resources. As you consider your work priorities today and moving into the future, for this current fiscal year and the next, I want to share a couple observations. Moving forward in your strategic direction requires 2 simple and 1 complicated action. The 2 simple is to set a quality standard and tie that quality standard to quality rates. One is not possible without the other. They are as inextricable as nature and nurture. If you commit to moving your rates over the next 2 years to the cost of quality and articulate and link that to the quality within your QRIS system, you will move forward in all 4 of your strategic directions. The complicated one is the workforce. While the rates and quality standards will have a positive impact on the workforce, there are larger demographic factors that require more strategies to support and grow the early education workforce. What is left is access. And I suggest a change in the way we think about who is responsible for growing access. If you concentrate on ensuring your standards and rates are aligned and supported by you, the legislature and the governor should be responsible for meeting the access needs of the Commonwealth when they increase funding to your department. I struggle to figure out a reality in which you can manage both with finite resources. And so I suggest you focus on the quality strategies. And from my experience, the legislature prefers to focus on access at any rate. Thank you very, very much for what you have done this last few years. Your leadership has been felt by providers, by advocates, by the legislature, and now by my teachers. Thanks.
Great, that concludes our public comment period. Next up would be any corrections to the minutes from June 13th, when we were in the Basketball Hall of Fame. Any comment, any corrections from anyone? They look fine to me. Are you okay? All right, move to approve the minutes from the June 13th Board of Early Education and Care meeting. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Opposed? Abstentions? Thanks. All right, let's move into our items for discussion, starting with the fiscal presentation.
Well, hello, everybody. If you will, I feel a wee bit like Charles Dickens, who wrote in 1843 that fine novel, A Christmas Carol. And you might recall in that novel there was the ghost of Christmas past, the ghost of Christmas present, and the ghost of Christmas future. And I today get to present the budget of last year, the budget of this year, and a little bit of the budget of next year. I hope I'm as captivating as Mr. Dickens in this presentation.
I'd like to make an observation. Charles Dickens was occasionally paid by the word for his novels. So I hope, Bill, that you won't follow his example too closely.
I'll try not to. All right, so today what we do want to dive into is a little bit about what happened in FY17, which by all measures was a fine year. What is now presently happening in FY18, and some chatter about where we want to go in FY19, which of course builds off of 18. The goal is, of course, for everybody to understand where we are fiscally, where we've been and where we're going, and really to understand that in the context of FY19, to really, as the chairperson said earlier, to frame our discussion for an earlier this year than in past years, discussions of what we might recommend for the budget of the future. So let's start with FY17. It was in some ways a trying year. We understand that there were issues to contend with revenue, and so we had to respond to the challenges that were given to us relative to those issues. And yet we did respond. There were 9C reductions, which is the removal of funds from the budget based upon a response to the lack of revenue, about $1.1 million in the EEC budget. And we captured those reductions and dealt with those. There was also the opportunity in FY17 to look at what would be a rather large balance left in the caseload account, the income eligible caseload account. And 3/4 of the way through the year, we were able to work with A&F and the governor's office to create a plan for the use of those funds and to ultimately create a PAC, a prior appropriation continued. And it is the creation of that PAC that has really put us into very good stead in FY18 and have been able to do a great deal of what Mr. Yasagiri was just talking about in his testimony. Of course, at the end of every fiscal year, we look at what's been left on the table because we want to spend as much as we can in fulfillment of what's been given to us as the mission. And what was left on the table at the end of the year is about $10 million, or 1.95% of the total FY17 budget. Now, 10 million sounds like a lot, so let's parse that into pieces. Largely, the $10 million is comprised of unspent funds in the 3060 supportive account. And why would there be such a large amount of funds unspent in that account? The answer is principally because the DTA caseload continues to decrease. At the beginning of the year, it was about 13,400 vouchers, and at the end of the year, it was about 11,988. We have to plan, of course, to serve every DTA family referred to us, and that's what we do. And we serve everyone referred to us. But of course, there could be funds left over, and that is, in fact, what happened. I will point out that at one time, FY14, the population in DTA was about 16,000 families. So when you look at the reversion of $10 million, about 9.9 million of it was in that account. Excluding the caseload reversion, we had about $519,000 unspent, and that's less than 1%. So that's a credit, frankly, to the field for the work that they did, and the staff at EEC who manages all the programs getting those out. This slide is just a visualization, a simple visualization of the caseload and non-caseload accounts within EEC. This represents that about almost 88% of our total budget is caseload, and about 12% is non-caseload. And of the reversion total, about 5% was non-caseload, and the balance was caseload. It's always good, I think, to look at how we've done compared to other years with reversions. And so this chart simply offers that to you. You can see that typically we're in pretty good stead, not returning a lot of funds. This year, as I've mentioned already, we're about 1.95%. The very fine news is that approximately $13.5 million from the 3,040.60 or the income eligible account has been packed or moved forward into FY18. And as I mentioned already, these are the funds that have allowed us to construct this year the rate increase and other measures that we're doing. Of the $519,000 that we're reverting that's non-caseload, only about $308,000 was encumbered by EEC but not spent, which means it was encumbered in a contract and a vendor didn't spend it, or a series of vendors didn't spend it. And the $184,000 was not committed, and that would be funds, for instance, in payroll, in fringe, in travel, where you can't encumber those funds, but you set them aside. And that's all that was left in those accounts. And that would be largely due to a travel budget that wasn't fully expended, or hiring that may not have occurred or that was delayed to occur. A little bit more focus on the FY17 piece. Governor Baker, in April of this past year, did propose the initiative to increase our rates and open access for over 1,000 children. The rates will be increased effective with October services paid in November, retroactive to July. That information will be released to the field shortly. The release of the vouchers for the 1,000 children will occur in October. So we're in a good plan to move ahead with the governor's promises to the field for what will be done.
Chair, if I might just add to that, I wanted to acknowledge and thank the fiscal team and the administration for allowing us to move forward with the rate increase in October. Traditionally, this board, those members that have been with us for a while would know that we usually don't vote on the rate increase until the fall, and we don't implement it until about mid-year, January or February. So this is a much more accelerated calendar that we're operating under. It's based on the fact that the governor and A&F in the legislature, through their actions, had endorsed this plan through the budget season. And then efforts on our team's part to put in all the operational elements that were needed to get this out quickly. So we're moving much more expeditiously than we have in the past. And I know that is certainly what the field would like us to do, but we understand it's the right thing to do to try to get these resources into the hands of programs as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Commissioner. So highlights. We increased the infant toddler rates to the 50th percentile effective April 1st. The 6% rate increase is going into effect, retroactive to July 1st. And we will be releasing over 1,100 vouchers for the field, which will increase access for the first time in many years. So all good and positive things. So the ghost of Christmas past has now finished his little offer in as few words as possible, and now moves to the ghost of Christmas present. We're in FY18. Fiscal year just began July 1st. Already it's proving to be an interesting year. We started off quite well. Our general appropriation acts, we are up to $558.9 million, which is up $22 million over last year, the funds available, an increase of more than 4%. We certainly are aware that many of our sister agencies did not have such adequate and beneficial funding, so we say that carefully, but with gratitude to the governor and the legislature for what happened with our budgets. We believe these funds are sufficient to support us moving through this year, and there's a number of things that will be happening this year. So we hope to implement the Quality Supports Initiative, in particular, that involves the funding of about 21 positions, which we are actively involved in right now, and I will address in another slide or two. The ability to hire those positions is significant to achieve the work that we need to do to advance our quality agenda, and I can't underscore that enough. Secondly, the PAC language, which was the prior appropriation, continued for the income eligible account. We offer for you the citation for where that can be found. The value is about $13.5 million. And we're planning for the use of that, of course, in everything I've outlined for you. Why were funds unexpended in 3,040.60? There's a number of reasons. It's the first year that CCFA was fully implemented, and CCFA, true to its promise, eliminated overcharges or double billings that may have been happening in the past. I don't say that in a fraudulent way, but in a way when there were two separate legacy systems tracking expenditures. There was a continued drop in vouchers because voucher access was closed, but is being addressed in FY18. And the contract utilization rate was about 82% for the year. This is a chart that many of you have seen. We released this to you as the budget moves through the process. So this is the chart that was released that represents where we are presently. The governor did veto some of the things that were in the passage of the budget. We've noted those, but I don't think I need to go into detail here on those unless anyone seeks that. So what we wanted to do a little bit here, and this sort of now is paving the walkway to FY19 a bit, is to say, well, where are we on things? Well, in FY16, this board, you, recommended that EEC achieve the 50th percentile in all prototypes, infant, toddler, preschool, school age, in 2 years, just thus prompting the need for about $24 million. Well, we got $12.5 million as a rate increase, so we put that into place for infant toddlers. To sustain the plan to achieve the 50th percentile in all prototypes would now cost about $36 million. The original estimated cost was 24, we got only 12, so there's the math. In FY18, as already pointed out, we have carried over the PAC of $13.5 million, and the legislature did invest an additional $15 million to support rate increase and opening of access. The cost of increasing the toddler rate to the 50th percentile and increasing rates another 6% this year is about $37 million. 9.3 for the infant toddler 50th percentile increase, and about $28 million for the 6% rate increase, which is across the board, center-based providers, family child care providers, etc. That's for everybody. And when we look at quality supports, we see that the board request was that we needed support for new positions. We requested 22 positions. And lo and behold, we got 21 positions. They are actively, candidates for those positions, all those positions, are actively being interviewed. Some have already moved to recommendation stage. We are aggressively going after that so that we can get to our full quota of full-time equivalents and bring all those people on as quickly as we can. So congratulations to the board. Two of the things you directed significantly have come to pass. Now we move to the budget of the future, FY19. And there are two particular areas to consider. The funds needed to maintain current services and commitments, because every time you put a rate increase in or increase access, that has to be annualized in a succeeding budget, and then proposed categories for strategic investments. I think what's important to point out to the board is that there are two areas in the FY19 maintenance or non-caseload budget that are that will have significant increases in 19. The first is payroll. And the reason that's a significant increase is because we are increasing the payroll by 21 positions. There was a reclassification agreement for the licensors, and there are normal step increases. The cost of that's about $600,000. Secondly, leases. The lease for the Worcester office expires February 28th of this year, and we're actively already working with DCAM to pursue new and better space for the Worcester office. But additionally, Springfield and Taunton leases expire, so we have to move into negotiations with those landlords about what to do. We expect that that's an increased cost of about $200,000. Based on current projections, and for those of you who attend the fiscal committee, you understand that caseload projections change every month because of how the service is delivered in the field and the vagaries of doing that with families. But right now, we estimate that the maintenance cost for caseload is about $492 million, about $233 for supportive DTA, and $258 for income eligible. And I will point out for the supportive piece of the supportive DTA account, we're right now at about 144% utilization. And that means we serve every child that's referred to us in accordance with the law, with the GAA. So that's why we're 44% above contract goal. And there's about 1,000 vouchers out there as well, serving DCF kids. We do want to point out that we will be releasing the vouchers, but effective the close of FY18, there's nothing built into the FY19 budget presently that assumes vouchers will continue. To say it differently, voucher access closes on that date unless something changes. And then finally, we've built into the FY maintenance budget the presumed 3.93% increase for the FCC providers, which was negotiated in the collective bargaining agreement. And I believe it's at this point where the commissioner will take over the job of the ghost of Christmas future.
Thank you very much, Bill. I want to just make note again of gratitude to the board for the position that it took last year in framing a budget request for FY18 that I think ultimately proved successful, and I'm going to use that as a segue to discussing and sharing, I guess, my own thoughts as to why that may have been the case and how we might think about approaching FY19. What I think was a successful year in FY18 perhaps seems even more impressive in the context of the overall budget picture last year. So I think folks in the room and around the table appreciate that last year was actually a very, very complicated year for the Commonwealth in terms of managing its budget. Revenues had been projected to be over 4% and ultimately came in at about 1/3 of that expected growth. And as a result of that, it was really a year largely of budget cuts throughout the course of the year. And that was, in fact, the framework for how the budget for FY18 was being developed by the administration and by the legislature. It was with declining revenues as the year carried on. And in fact, that still has persisted as we head into FY18. Achieving over 4% growth, having met both of our major budget objectives and what we laid out last year, I think is even more impressive when you think about how little opportunity there was for growth within the budget. And I think it's a testament to the administration and the legislature and the level of priority that they're placing on our work that we were able to do that. I think it's important context for us to consider as we're thinking about the FY19 budget conversation. I'm excited that we're launching this conversation earlier this year. The idea being that we'll have an opportunity to talk about our budget plans and our thinking over the course of a 3-month period and bring it back to you for final consideration in November. An advantage to that would be that that additional month is really valuable in the context of budget planning for the administration and the legislature. The governor's budget proposal really needs to be put to bed by the end of December, so our past practice of having finalized the budget recommendation in early December didn't leave much time for its consideration by the administration, and this will provide some additional opportunity there. I think we have to be mindful of what Bill just covered in his presentation, specifically that our projected maintenance costs for FY19 already would require significant new investment in the agency just to continue to support the increases that we're bringing forward this year in the personnel expansion that we're bringing forward this year. And so the pragmatist in me needs to just underscore that fact that we're starting off in a position just to maintain where we're going to be at the end of this year, in a position having to request additional funding. And these are not new matters, and they're matters that we certainly discussed with the Department of Administration and Finance as we were bringing these programs forward, but still, in the environment that we're operating under with revenues already under benchmark for FY18, I think there are important considerations to keep in sight. And then a third piece before I move forward into the discussion is simply what I think was the winning formula for last year. I think that the simplicity of the board's budget recommendation last year was really, really valuable. It ultimately boiled down to a push to enhance our subsidy rates and a push to support the department in its capacity to administer the work that we have to do day to day. And I think that it departed to some extent from some of our prior budget requests in that it was not so aspirational and so expansive that nobody could identify what the really important thing was. And as a result, in an effort to ask for everything, we frequently got nothing. And I think last year, by bringing forward a proposal that was really clear and targeted, we were able to penetrate through the literally thousands of requests that the administration and the legislature receive during the budget season, and that really helped us. And it also allowed, I think, our field of early education and care to rally around those flags, and that reinforced, I think, the advocacy that proved to be successful. So I think that those three dimensions are really important as we start to think about FY19. The fact that revenues are still weak and are not measuring up to what we would hope them to be as this year starts out. Our maintenance costs are higher than usual as we head into FY19, in that there's virtue, I think, in having a simple request. Appropriately ambitious, because this is an opportunity to state where we want to go and how we would like to get there, but I think that appropriateness is an important component. So I just wanted to flag that as we get underway. So Bill has covered the maintenance component of it, and we would presume that as we come to you over the course of the next 2 months, that we're going to start with that as the foundation. Other areas that I've identified for our preliminary conversation on the FY19 budget involve caseload, the center-based program rate increase, which is not included or assumed that there be anything further in FY19. We want to continue to be mindful of what our CCDF implementation needs are to meet those responsibilities. As we move through this year and we get to a point of resolving QRIS in the course of FY18, as far as the new standards, we want to ensure that we're going to be able to move forward and implement that system and begin to scale that system. So that's another consideration. And related to the QRIS, because they're intrinsically linked, is the ongoing work to develop our career lattice and our teacher qualification system. And finally, transportation, which we discussed at the board retreat, is an item that we are continuing to look at. And as you'll see in the course of this presentation, one that we'll monitor in the event that we are able to achieve any firm recommendations, either short-term or long-term, in the course of our budget planning. So we're going to put a hold on that category. I note that obviously this conversation invites whether or not these are the appropriate areas for us to be looking at in addition to our maintenance needs. And certainly we can go beyond these areas. I think the agency's feeling is that this is the right playground for us right now to be focusing on as we're beginning the development of our FY19 budget. Are there any questions here before we move? Okay. So in the case of caseload, I think it's important to note that we really did make a conscious decision over the last couple of years, and particularly last year, that in our focus on the stability of the early education and care system and on our efforts to ensure that we were achieving the level of program quality that we believe is necessary across that system, that we were not going to focus on access expansion. And therefore, our final request in FY18 did not include an expansion dimension. However, we were able to achieve, not just through the governor's proposal for an expansion of 1,100 vouchers this year, but the second year of the preschool expansion grant and ongoing growth within our supportive child care for DCF. We were able to expand access over the course of last year, with an offset being what Bill had noted earlier, is that DTA's caseload has been dropping. So there were categories of expansion that we were in fact able to achieve, notwithstanding the fact that we weren't making that our core priority. So as we think about FY19, I think an essential question for us to grapple with is this a time to maintain the posture that we had for FY19, to maintain our focus on stability and program quality, or do we want to embark on something more ambitious at this time? And if so, what would those ambitions look like, and where should we be targeting them? Simply within income eligible care and the wait list, which is what we often have done in recent years. Should we be looking at DCF and DTA child care? And should we begin planning? And I think the answer to the next one is yes, but the matter of how. For the preschool expansion grant wind down, which is not occurring at the end of FY18, but will occur at the end of FY19. I thought it was important for the department to kind of put a stake in the ground for this conversation in order to maybe try to get to the most meaningful conversation that we could have today in areas that we could. And so I would say that my initial approach to this would be to encourage maintaining the focus that we've had over the last year on the stability of the system and on our program quality agenda, that we would start with proposing an IE attrition strategy similar to the one that ultimately was adopted for FY18 with the 1,100 vouchers. And we'll continue to look at what's going on within DCF and DTA in the PEG program, but that our caseload efforts would be really focused on trying to stem any anticipated attrition within the income eligible program for this year, and not expand beyond that, so that we can reserve our ask for those items that really are continuing to focus on stability and quality across the system. So I could stop in each category.
Thanks. Can I ask you one clarifying question, Commissioner? When you say what kinds of preparations around the PEG, can you put some shape on how you're thinking about the PEG and what that might look like as a feasible both strategic and tactical kind of approach?
Yeah, I think another, I think, really important reason for thinking that this is not the year to put a specific proposal forward is that, as was noted in my memo, and this will be part of the next presentation that we talk about, the most serious data that we're going to receive from the evaluation of that program will really be arriving in the middle of this fiscal year. So I think we'll have a much stronger basis for evaluating what is working within the PEG program and what might be the appropriate way for us to give shape to whatever the legacy of the federal preschool expansion grant will be in the course of evaluating that data. There have been proposals, I think folks know, from the legislature that have yet to materialize in the budget that would seek to expand on the PEG model, and I think that there will probably continue to be some consideration of that. But I think that we want to really take a look at what the impact of the program has been across the data that we expect to get this year before we come forward with a concrete proposal. We designed the program to the best of our abilities 3+ years ago when we applied for the grant with a number of assumptions. We need to make sure that the research before we were to come forward with some. Year grant, $15 million, 1.5. Notification. Federally funded. 19.
More money from the feds on this, or until after your data comes in, or?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't, if I was confusing it. As far as seeking funding from a federal source, if such an opportunity were made available, I think we would, I don't know that we would even consider it. I think we would jump on that as a possibility. There's been no suggestion, however, that that would be the case. In fact, most of the conjecture was whether or not the federal government would fulfill the 4-year commitment that they're making. And to be fair to them, they actually had indicated at the beginning of this grant that the decision would be made on an annual basis, unlike the Early Learning Challenge grant, in which there was a full commitment up front. This grant was awarded on an annual basis. And so at this point, I think our assumption is that their commitment at this stage verbally to the full 4 years probably represents their full commitment to this. But we'll monitor any other opportunities that the federal government might provide.
Tom, I really appreciate that you included the question about the PEG grant, because I think that particular project really allows us to look at things other than all the other pieces that we've discussed, the vouchers, the rates, equally as important. But the PEG grant allows us to really look at what's happening and what the outcomes for children will be. I think it's one of the major pieces in this department that we look at curriculum and instruction. We look at work with families. We look at inclusive practices. And I think we should really keep on searching the data and seeing what is it that the PEG outcomes have shown us with those pieces, so that we can begin to generalize, integrate, use that for some of our existing programs like licensing, professional development, because the pieces of instruction and curriculum aren't necessarily addressed in the financial aspect of rates and vouchers and caseload. And so this gets, I think, to the quality piece. Mm-hmm. And here is our opportunity to look at the quality.
Excellent point. I think it's sort of outside the context of our FY19 planning, perhaps, but gets to what are we going to do with the research that we're going to be receiving in the course of this year. And I think it maybe relates to some of our board activities, once we get past December. The first data is not expected to really arrive until January, and then I think I provided in my memo a calendar for when we expect the research to roll out for us this year. But that will really give us an opportunity to dig in on those issues over the course of the early part of 2018.
System stability, simple.
I could understand why. I should have written, if Charles Dickens had written this. Probably it should read, maintain our focus on system stability, period. And then we recommend proposing an IE attrition strategy as opposed to a more ambitious waitlist remediation strategy. We have, in recent years, I'd say over the past 5 years, often included a waitlist remediation strategy that would suggest either, half or more of the waitlist be addressed in the course of a upcoming fiscal year. So I think it was my intention was to say that we really should maintain our focus as we have on trying to ensure that our present system has resources sufficient to meet the present needs and not pivot hard in a direction of system expansion for FY19. At the same time, it does here suggest that we would bring forward to you a estimate for the cost of what an IE attrition mitigation plan would be, similar to the 1,100 vouchers that we have built in for FY18. We would look at that for FY19 and make that a component of our proposal to the board for your consideration. Does that?
Yes, that's much better.
That's much better than the way I wrote it.
I would, yeah, that's terrific. Thank you.
If I could just make the comment, and I'd love to hear from others, my view is that it's critical that we maintain this real focus on the stability and the program quality, which is to say, many reforms fail because of lack of sustained attention. And I think we're at that place where we're feeling celebratory, which is great, and it was a great year, and certainly the field is feeling it. And I think that, in my view, the danger would be that we pivot and say, that part is done, or at least it's not nearly as important. And I think that's sometimes a real pitfall in this kind of work. But it would be good to hear from others. But I would be in strong support of the IE sort of, the mitigation strategy. And I think that worked out really well with where we landed in FY18 to do some of that work, but to really be clear that we have a priority and we have limited resources, and the priority is around workforce and stability.
Great. Excellent. If there are no further questions, I'll move forward to center-based rates, which is the second category that we had identified. So as we've covered at least several times already in the course of the day today, we are advancing a 6% rate increase for FY18. The 6% rate increase will apply both for subsidized family child care providers, because that was the terms for our contract with SEIU 509 for year 2 of that contract, FY18. It will apply to center-based subsidized providers as well as family child care system administrators, which was our proposal that was brought forward in the spring and adopted in the budget. And what we are looking at as we head into FY19, and as Bill had indicated, is that there is no presumption for a further increase for center-based providers and for family child care system administrators in the FY19 maintenance budget. We note here, because I think it's important for the board to be aware, that we have agreed to a 3.93% increase for family child care providers as part of our contract with SEIU 509. It's a 3-year contract running through FY19, and the third year will provide for a 3.93% increase, and that's our contract, that's our obligation that will be built into our maintenance for next year. So the questions as we move forward in our early considerations here are, should we propose a center-based rate increase as part of the board's budget recommendation? That's one question. Assuming that is the case, should we frame any proposed increases as part of a multi-year strategy toward a specific benchmark? And I said purely as an example here, the 60th percentile of the market rates. I proposed this second question because this actually is the strategy that the board adopted 2 years ago as it moved on a year earlier. A 2-year approach will want to, over the next 3 months, now monitor programs, which is a category that we had not previously had to monitor. The ongoing background record checks requirements, which, as well as, all right. I put together QRIS, the career ladder, and teacher qualifications in one slide here, as opposed to treating them separately, because I think there's really important and perhaps some obvious integration within that work. I want to note that for a lot of categories, but for these areas in particular, the IT needs to really scale the work up are significant. We're already in the process right now of working with EOE IT. We are about to move forward to procure a business analyst to start to gather the business requirements that would inform a request this spring for capital funding to develop an IT system for this department that would help manage across all of our workforce systems. We presently have a independent IT application for QRIS, our professional qualification registry, our teacher qualification registry. All of those systems are quite old. In fact, I believe that our TQ is competing right now and maybe had won the competition for the oldest existing system within the Commonwealth. I say this not as a joke. It actually lives as a laptop enclosed in glass within this agency, as though it was one of the original IBM computers at a museum. But it's undercover for its protection, because that's what's holding our TQ system together right now. So this is a much needed resource for the agency, and the appropriate vehicle for that really is the capital funding process that we've engaged in successfully in recent years to help fund our activities with the LEAD system and with background record check system, and for part of the CCFA system. So we'll be engaged in that process there. But we also know that there is going to be needs outside of just IT in order to make this all work. So as we're thinking about scaling up the program quality monitoring that will be necessary for our QRIS, as we're thinking about the types of technical assistance that would be necessary, particularly the support that will be needed around class and screening requirements that are presently within the draft QRIS. As we think about the policy capacity that this agency will need to be able to manage this system, we do anticipate in much of the QRIS proposal is oriented at trying to bring this to a program level and build capacity at the program level. And to the extent that we need external resources, we expect to rely heavily on contracting, not building new units here at EEC to try to be the professional development system for the state, but rather that we would contract to secure what's needed there. But that's got to be managed, and so we expect that we will need to have resources in place as we're moving forward with the implementation of QRIS. Similarly, as was already initiated this spring, we want to mature and resolve a final career lattice for our system. We don't feel that the existing career lattice nor the existing teacher qualification system is serving our field as well as it needs to be, and it's an opportunity for us to modernize both the lattice and the teacher qualification system. So we would think that as an outgrowth of the QRIS work, and as we're working on the career lattice work in particular in conjunction with the QRIS work, we're going to want to move quickly into the teacher qualifications system and how we might redesign that. So you see, for example, a notation here that we would like to make sure that we have the ability to do the business analysis necessary for that work. So we're going to want to work closely with the Fiscal and Oversight Committees, committee and the Workforce Ad Hoc Committee this fall as we're doing our budget planning to, again, bring some greater degree of specificity to these areas and make those a part of what we would ask you to consider as well. So these are priority areas, I think, important too. Any questions or comments, Mary?
I'm not sure my question's a complete alignment, but, or Commissioner. I know we got a grant, we got it from the Bar Foundation and I think the Boston Foundation, and it was gonna build our capacity around some data management.
That's right.
Can you just give us an update on where that all sits at the moment?
Yeah, so we just have signed our agreements with the Bar Foundation and the Boston Foundation. Both have generously made grants to EEC for this present year, FY18. We went knocking on their door, as Mary knows, and I should note, by the way, the Davis Foundation was also willing to be engaged in this. That's why Mary knows. But we went looking for these resources. They have funded a new position here at the agency that will provide us with data analysis capability. They have funded it through this year, but both foundations have indicated to us that they are willing to fund this as a 2-year project, and that's what we asked them to fund from the get-go. We have a considerable amount of data here at the agency. Those in the room that work with this agency who submit data to us probably wonder where it goes, and that's a fair question. I see lots of heads nodding in the back of the room. And frankly, the agency is well aware of that, that we're not corralling it, we're not putting it to good use, and we don't really have a sufficiently firm understanding of what we're sitting on. So this position is really going to give us the opportunity to have a designated individual to work on that with us, to not just catalog it, but to really try to take us to the next level of discerning what is useful and what's not useful, and how we would start to integrate that into our business practices here at the agency. At the same time, we're actually working with IT, which I think this will dovetail, on our dashboarding capabilities, and to see how we might start to move some of this data into a usable state that we might be able to access readily in dashboard form. So that is that's the goal of that project, and we're really, really excited about it. I think it will also be really important for us, and I think this is no small benefit. It will help us discern what it is that we're collecting that never will be used and therefore never should be collected. And it will give us an opportunity to try to diminish the administrative burden on the field and the administrative burden that we create internally by collecting unnecessary information from folks. Great. Oh, any other questions on this category? And this is, as I noted earlier, transportation. It's a placeholder. It came up in public comment. We had engaged the public consulting group in the course of the last fiscal year. They delivered, as we requested and required under that contract, a report to us that we discussed at the board retreat. PCG brought forward a number of recommendations. The department believes that report is a really credible source of recommendations. We're going to be working with the Fiscal and Oversight Committee this fall to continue to assess that. We've also set aside, if needed, some resources in our budget planning if we need to look at any particular areas within that report a bit more deeply. We understood that perhaps a challenge within assessing those recommendations is the trade-offs. You know, what is the true cost and what would be the implications? So we, subsequent to the board retreat, began to look at our resources for this year based on the conversation that we had with the board, and thought about whether or not we might have some additional resources to do further study of discrete areas within the report. We're not looking to do a 2.0 report, but we might look at the opportunity to explore, as I said, what the cost implications and trade-offs actually might be, with the plan for the agency to bring forward to the board our recommendation informed by PCG with those trade-offs in mind. So that's our plan. The reason I put this here is it's possible, and I think worth noting, that in the context of that exploration, there may be proposals that would have cost implications for FY19, and we just want to put that there as a placeholder.
Great.
That's great. Any further questions before we leave here? Otherwise, this has been really helpful. I think it will give us an opportunity to frame this out. I think it's worth pointing out here that at this stage, I am aware of the irony of my having lectured Bill on not using too many words in the course of his presentation, given how wordy mine perhaps was. So, thank you.
Great, excellent, thank you, Bill, Commissioner. I think that's a great start to, and a good, it leaves us a little more time to think it through, and also to just move the whole process up a little to be a little more in line with the overall context for the state. So let's move to our next.
To 18, and where today, FY, as our memo form, a list of things that were done this year, and it was done with passion, and it was done with a lot of ingenuity, and a lot of sweat went into a lot of that work. So I'm extraordinarily grateful to the agency staff for all of that work. Based on our work last year and what we had resolved as our priorities for last year, I identified for the board 4 areas that would remain our focus for this upcoming year. Workforce was one of those priorities, and as noted, we anticipate ongoing work with the Career Lattice, and that would lead into opportunities for us to assess and perhaps reform our educator qualification system. We also will be looking at the components of the QRAS that we're focusing on that would require professional development support, screening, and any targeted approaches to coaching that might be necessary in alignment with the QRAS. We took to heart our conversation at the board retreat. I think the big takeaway for me when it came to our ambition on scale associated with the requirements within our Child Care Development Fund state plan. So there's mandated health and safety trainings. We've developed a module, and we're going to be moving forward with that in the course of FY18. I articulated our workforce goals in the memo. And similarly within program quality, which was the second category, we identified that we would complete the QRAS revisions in the course of this year. We will be looking at the transportation report, and as noted, we'll be bringing forward our own recommendations using that as a foundation to the board in the course of this year. We will be looking really, really intently at the preschool expansion grant evaluation that's ongoing, and we're really looking forward to that. Within our work in the field, we are going to be launching differential licensing, which we had piloted previously and had built into the LEAD system, and we are actually less than 2 weeks away from launching the use of the differential licensing tool, which is a big part of meeting our annual visitation requirements, and we're going to continue to develop the LEAD system to further enhance our field work. And then we are, within program quality, looking at the opportunities that would be present within the RFR for our subsidized contracts, which we still are planning to release that RFR at the end of January of 2018 to award those subsidy contracts for FY19. So those are all anticipated highlights for our program quality activities. Within the CCDF state plan implementation work, background record checks remains a very high priority, and we are working on an ambitious IT system that we hope will be completed in early 2018. There are 3 specific sets of regulations that we're going to be bringing to the board, and I'll touch on that in just a moment. But those involve our background record checks, our subsidy regulations, and our enforcement regulations. And then finally, agency operations. While we are very, very grateful and excited about the staff hiring plan that Bill outlined earlier today, and we're focusing those on really core needs, background record checks, field investigations among them. We are aware that we still have significant needs, and we're going to try to maximize the opportunity that this hiring plan has given us to not only bring in the capacity to do that work, but to reorganize ourselves a little bit. I'm especially excited that we're going to be able to separate the Associate Commissioner for Field Operations Policy position and the Associate Commissioner for Field Investigations from their RD positions. Under the hiring plan, we're going to be able to allow those people to focus full-time on field operations policy and on investigations. That, I believe, is absolutely integral in trying to move from the work as it historically has existed as our licensing work and our program quality support work. As we're thinking about trying to integrate those two worlds, I think having full-time support within those two roles is going to be of enormous assistance, particularly taking advantage of having our new Associate Commissioner for Workforce Development joining the team. And as was noted in the question from Mary, we have this opportunity with a data specialist that I think is going to be really, really exciting and could help us think about how we do our work and manage our business differently. So I outlined in the course of that memo each of those areas, and I talked about the specific objectives that we had within those 4 categories for priority. And I'm happy to maybe stop here and ask if you have any questions about the memo or any of those areas before I roll into a short slide deck that would talk about some of our thoughts for the fall as the agency is going to relate to the board. Was there anything missing? Was there anything in there that surprised you? This is good. Terrific. All right. So with that in mind, I briefly summarized the memo, and I wanted to make sure that I laid out before you what our priorities and goals were for this upcoming year. And then I wanted to spend a little time with you to talk about what our plans are for engaging you over the course of this fall. Working with the chair, we had put together some draft agenda for this fall. It's weighted heavily to regulations, much more heavily than has been the case in the past. The big driver there really is the Child Care Development Block Grant and the requirements of that grant and changes that we are compelled to make, but it's also really an opportunity for us in some cases to undertake some, I think, positive, arguably maybe in some cases overdue changes as well. So next month we would propose bringing to you our adoption and placement regulations for a discussion and vote. Those are not associated with the Child Care Development Block Grant. They're simply on schedule to be revised. We've actually worked over a very long history, many years on this issue. There's some head nodding at the table. These were scheduled to come forward, pulled back at various times, and we are now prepared to bring them back to you next month. We also would bring to you the background record check regulations for discussion and vote to address those issues. It's our plan, I want to say in both of these cases, to not simply just bring to you the new regulations redlined and have a discussion on the basis of that. We want to obviously summarize the impacts of those and discuss what some of the trade-offs are in the course of those materials, and also point out to you where we might see challenges that remain within those areas, because while we obviously believe that we're going to be bringing forward regulations that would improve those areas, it doesn't make some of these complex areas less complicated, and we're going to want to point out to you where those complications still exist as you're giving consideration to them. In the case of any of these regulation proposals, we're bringing them to you for discussion and vote to put out for public comment. So just wanted to make note of that. We would bring back to you in October the preliminary work around our FY19 budget recommendation for discussion. And then we would move on to November. We'd bring back that piece in November for you to discuss and hopefully vote on. And we'd be at a point at that stage to approve that and to move that forward. We also want to come back to you in November and talk to you about our FY19 workforce grant and contract planning. This, we think, is an important and valuable conversation to have with you as we think and take advantage of, I think, the opportunity within what is now a consolidated quality grant account. We really want to start thinking about how we might make some important strategic moves within those funds and look at our dollars that we have set aside within our budget for contracts that relate to workforce supports. And we've already begun to make some moves in those directions in the course of transitioning from FY17 to FY18. But we want to talk about where we are, and we want to talk about where we think we're going to be heading in FY19. So that's another area that we brought up. The Commissioner's evaluation is there as well for November. And then heading into December, we have another set of regulations that we're going to be bringing forward to you, financial assistance regulations, as well as the enforcement regulations. Again, both motivated, at least in terms of the timing, under CCDBG. And so that is our proposed schedule for the fall.
We will be well-versed in regulations by the end of December.
A crash course in regulations. At the same time, we have scheduled, obviously, meetings for the Fiscal and Oversight Committee, as well as the Workforce Ad Hoc Committee. We have plans for the development of a CCDF State Plan Implementation Ad Hoc Committee. I've outlined here the items that we intend to discuss over the course of the fall. One piece about doing these as needed. So we are going to hold dates throughout the fall, but we'll be in communication with the chairs and with the members. And we'll only hold meetings if there's a reason to hold a meeting. I think we're going to try to, sometimes we fall into a little bit of a practice of, well, we have the dates, so why don't we just meet? But I think that all of our time is valuable, and we want to try to make sure that we're maximizing that. So the schedule has been laid out already. We'll take advantage of it as needed and to the best of our abilities. Within Fiscal and Oversight, we will continue to do caseload and spending updates. As I noted earlier, the transportation work will move into that committee, as discussed at the board retreat. And we'll continue some of the work, some of the side work on FY19 board budget development activities. Within the Workforce Ad Hoc Committee, we see professional development as a topic and continuing to move forward with our focus on foundational training and supports. The QRIS revision work will continue to surface there. The career lattice development will be an ongoing piece of work, not just this fall, but throughout the year. And likely the conversation that I just noted that would move to the board, we might start some preliminary conversations around workforce grant and contract planning within that group as well. And then those regulations that I noted earlier that relate to the Child Care Development Block Grant would be discussed in advance of the board meeting as needed with the ad hoc committee. So background record checks, financial assistance, and subsidy work, regulation work would take place within that setting. Questions? Comments? So it's going to be another easy year here at the department. Not a lot of work to be done. No, we appreciate the support that we're always getting from you, and we have a lot of work to do this year. I think the challenge still remains in terms of what we are being required to do, what we hope to do, how we balance that out with the resources that we have here. It's being achieved to date through the incredible effort of folks here at the agency and a lot of support from the field as well. And we're going to need that this year if we're going to be able to accomplish the goals and priorities that were outlined in the memo that I provided to you. And we'll be honest with you and continue to be honest with you about those constraints as we're heading into this year, and continue to be creative, as I think we have been, in trying to work around any constraints that we might find ourselves operating under. So I think it's an exciting year. I think we're continuing to build. I feel really good about looking at the ground that we've traveled and seeing a discernible path, I think, emerging from that, which I think is leading to some really good and important things within this work. So happy to take any other questions or comments.
I guess it's just a comment. I guess I'll use two words, ambitious and overwhelming. Ambitious is good, overwhelming is not so good. I don't know that there's anything here, Commissioner, that's negotiable, but I would ask you to sort of think about that in the context of this being so ambitious and just maybe have in the back of our mind as we really sort of get into it, is there any leeway? Because to do all this well is ambitious.
Thank you very much for the license to consider that. I think I would agree wholeheartedly with you in both of your characterizations. I would note, actually, that none of the areas that I highlighted are new. So to the extent that I'm already trying to manage the overwhelming component of that, we're not proposing any additional areas. I think we'll have to be candid as we undertake the work about what's achievable on what timeline. I don't think, all of the items that we raised here, I know many of them are not going to be resolved in the course of just one fiscal year. I think they represent a continuation of work that we've been doing. I think in some cases we'll be able to advance to a final state, and in other areas we're just going to be advancing, and we'll continue to carry on with that conversation. But I think I appreciate your recognition of that, and I think it will certainly make it comfortable and easier for all the conversations that we have to have over the course of a year about what's doable at any given moment, because those will be important conversations.
Other comments from the commissioner? The only other thing I'd add is I think that, and we've all certainly talked about this at one point in time or another, but it does, building off Mary's comments, the CCDF piece really begs this: what has to be done at what point in time, and what would be really good to do for more coordination and more impact at the agency, and what is just too big a task. And I think that's the spirit. I think that's the only way to approach CCDF without just it becoming something that's really unwieldy and unmanageable and too expensive. So I think that's the real flavor of that ad hoc that builds directly off the point, Mary. But overall, Commissioner, thank you for your leadership and for laying things out today. I think we're in good shape to press onward. Thank you. It's 2:54. Gives you an hour and 6 minutes of found time. Thanks to all of you, and I've got a couple follow-ups on the CCDF ad hoc and the Commissioner's evaluation. We'll get those wheels in motion, and I look forward to working with all of you. Thanks. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Yeah.